Hello beauties, I hope you're doing amazing. Today we are going to dupe the Helaween Little Ghost palette from Oden's Eye. This one. If that sounds good to you, let's go into the video. Beauties, why are we trying to dupe these palettes? Number one, duping is fun. It's an extremely fun exercise to do swatches of different colors on your hands. So if you haven't tried it, I recommend trying it. Second, I would love to own all of these palettes, but I just can't afford every single palette under the sun, which is why I am trying to dupe every palette that is coming out that I can dupe, or at least I'm trying to dupe them. Maybe I fail. You can tell me in the comments below if you think I've failed. So duping can save you some money, and it might make you realize that you actually don't need to buy every single palette. You might already have some of the colors from these palettes in your collection already, if you own a lot of singles, or even if you own some other palettes. We are going to tap into some palettes today. Also, another disclaimer, beauties, I'm not claiming that these are exact dupes. I don't own the original palette, but I've looked through my singles and some of my palettes that have magnetic pans, and I've tried to find the closest shade to the shade that I'm seeing in this swatch photo. I'm using this swatch photo as reference. If you're wondering what I used to make this eye look, I was looking at my last video for the Trick or Treat, duping of the Trick or Treat palette, video tagged in the description box below if you're curious. And then I thought to myself, why am I using another palette to do the eye look? Why don't I just use the dupes to make an eye look? Which makes me think that you can probably achieve this eye look if you have purchased the palette we're duping today. Let's just jump into it. Starting with Banana Taffy, that beautiful yellow shade. For that one, I picked Sweet Spot from ColourPop, which is a beautiful yellow. By the way, beauties, look at my nails if you haven't. So this is the swatch, and you know, ColourPop's mattes, you need to build them up, but they can build up very, very nicely. Let's do a swatch of this. So this is Banana Taffy for you all. As I mentioned earlier in the video, for some of these colors, I had to go into my other palettes, magnetic palettes, and ColourPop is an amazing brand for this kind of exercise because all of ColourPop's palettes are magnetic, and I've used Fade into Hue as I did in my past dupe palette of the Trick or Treat. Now, beauties, these kinds of rainbow palettes are ideal for these kinds of exercises. This is how I use these palettes, and the reason I love rainbow palettes from brands that do magnetic pans. So this is the color that I use. Let's see if I can pronounce it. Zeitgeist. I'm sure that's not how it's pronounced. Whatever, but that dark purple color is the color that I've used for the second color, which is Little Ghost in the original palette. So the key here was to keep the purple kind of warm toned. I have a lot of dark cool tone purples, but I wanted to use a warm tone purple. And this is how it swatched on my hand. And I think this is the closest to what I'm seeing in that photo. Beauties, the difference between a cool toned and a warm toned purple is that a warm toned purple has more red than blue. Let's continue with the next color, Ominous. And for that one, I picked Sydney Grace's Flannel. This is a shimmer shade. So again, a relatively warm toned purple. I have a lot of purples. As you know, it's one of my favorite colors. It's just that I needed to make sure the purple color that I pick is relatively warm toned. Beauties, one thing that I found interesting was that there are a few colors in the Little Ghost palette that pretty much also show up in the Trick or Treat palette. I'm going to put the two palettes side by side. So you can see some colors that look like exist in both, and I'm going to tell you all which ones I think can be used for both palettes. And for that reason, I actually kind of tried to use the same dupes. So for this next color, Licorice, I picked one of the colors that I had used for duping the Trick or Treat palette as well. This color is Midnight Sun from Aurora Struck palette from ColourPop. This one, which is a cool tone dark brown. Now, After looking a little more in my collection, I found some other cool tone dark browns, but I wanted to stick with this one because, as I said, I feel that there are some dupes between these two palettes. So the question then becomes, do you need both of these palettes? Or if you buy both of them, you're kind of duping the colors. Okay, beauties, let's continue to the next row. So this is the second row from top. Again, you can even use one of these two palettes to find dupes for this color Skeleton, which is the first color from the left. But I picked a single that I have from Glam Shop. I like to showcase a lot of singles in this channel and use a lot of different brands because I like to incentivize all of you all to look into purchasing singles. So this is Heath from Glam Shop. This is a little more pink, but I don't mind that. The color in the palette looks a little more purple, but I don't mind that. As I said, the two palettes that I mentioned earlier from ColourPop and even their lavender six pans have much more closer dupes, but I just wanted to try something a little more pinky because I'm using the dupes that I'm creating, hence creating this eye look with it. And I figured something a little more pinky is just more my vibes. Continuing to zombie the next color for this, for duping this, I picked Mythical from Sydney Grace. So this is the color. I figured this is very close in comparison to that swatch. So this is a swatch of Mythical from Sydney Grace. And then the next one is Boo. And for that one, to dupe that one, I picked Marshmallow Pillows from Divina. This seemed like a relatively close color. I have a lot of these pink to bluey purple ones or pink bases with a crust of bluey purple. Right off the top of my head, I can think of a few similar shades from Cleona, a few similar shades from NBA Cosmetics. I have swatch of both of those brands in my channel and other videos. I'll put those videos in the description box below. If you want to use one of the other ones, if you have the dupe in those brands, you can use that. Let's see the swatch. This color is pretty flaky and it performs best on top of a tacky base. I think Divina also mentions that and recommends NYX's glitter primer on their site. So I haven't used a tacky base here, but you can kind of see the swatch. It has a pink base and the bluey, purpley shimmer on top. Let's continue for the next color, which is Haunted House. In the palette, I used Complicated. This color is from Luxie Beauty, and mine shattered, which is why it looks all kind of weird on the top because I had to press it back. Let's swatch this. This is sort of a cool toned deep blue. So these are the dupes of the second row from top. Okay, beauties, continuing with the third row, Cobweb, which is the first color from the left-hand side. Again, we're counting the rows from top, is a shimmery cream. And frankly, for this color, I used the same color that I had used in the Trick or Treat palette. I believe it was the first color on the top left-hand side in the Trick or Treat palette. And I used 186 from Bernovich. Again, this is one of my favorite colors. I think this is more of a dupe for this color based on the swatch, because in the other palette, the color that I duped this with was a little more green and a little more yellow. This is a beautiful color, Beauties. And it definitely resembles the color based on that swatch pretty closely. For the next blue color called Ghoulish, I dabbed again into Fade into Hue palette. This is Take It Easel. There are a lot of other options that you can use in, you know, these 9 pans from ColourPop, or frankly in a lot of other palettes. I myself have a few blues from different brands like Copacetic, etc. that I could have used, but I just kind of wanted to use this one. In fact, you can even use a color in the Aurora Struck palette if you have that palette instead. But this color looks pretty close to what you see swatched in the photo. Okay, beauties, our next color in the Little Ghost palette is Creepy. And for that one, I used, again, Sydney Grace. This is Juggler. Let's use a finger I have not used. This is sort of a medium toned shimmery teal. Beautiful, beautiful color. I bought these during the Christmas and July sale from Sydney Grace Beauties. Don't miss out on Sydney Grace's sales. They're just amazing. And I'm so happy with the both mattes and the shimmers that I've bought from them. To dupe our next color in the palette Haunted, I picked Running on E from Copacetic Cosmetics Beauties. This is the color that's in my outer V, and I'm loving this. Look at that. I don't know if this color is an exact dupe because I've seen different tones in different photos of the palette. So in some photos it's more blue. Like even if you look at this photo, what looks like in the palette is lighter than what looks like in the swatches. So it's kind of difficult to say, but I love this color, so this is what I used. It's a little more teal, I would say, than what you see in the palette. I just figured everything in this row could just be used together for a look. In fact, even if you use a dark blue, you can do the same thing. There are other colors both in Fade into Hue as well as Aurora Struck that you could use if you have either of those palettes. But I could not find in my collection something that more closely resembled exactly the color you see in that photo. If you know of a color, a single, or even in a color in a palette, obviously not in the Little Ghost palette, that closely resembles that as a dupe, let me know. Okay, beauties, we're going to the last row from top. Before I continue though, I wanted to quickly mention that if you have this palette, you can use each horizontal row to create a cohesive look. So if you look at these, each horizontal row kind of is comprised of colors more or less in the same color family or colors that are complements. Like the top row, yellow is a complementary color to purple, and we've talked about it. Complementary colors usually look good together if you can work with them well because they make things stand out. But for example, the third row, as I mentioned, the blues and the cream, you can make multiple looks with the quad in that row. Similarly, the second row from top as well as the bottom row. Okay, now going into the bottom row, the first color that we have is Magical. And if you look at the palette in this photo, it looks very bright pink. However, in the swatch, it looks a little more metallic bronzy, if you know what I mean. So I chose a color that kind of represents both. This is Crimson Eclipse from Terra Moons. So this color is pink from some angles and sort of bronze and gold from some other angles. Let's swatch it. In fact, from where I'm looking at it, I kind of see green. I'm going to show it from a different angle in a minute and you can see the other shifts as well. Moving ahead for the orange color, Candy Cane. Beauties, I used the same orange that I had used in the first palette for our Trick or Treat palette. Again, this is another color that I feel like is shared between the two palettes. Now, I don't know for real if you have the two palettes and you know whether these two colors actually swatch differently. Let me know, but I don't see any reason why we needed another variation of orange, so I just picked the same orange, Paprika from Glam Shop. This is a beautiful, beautiful orange. For the third color from the left, Screech, I see sort of an orange shimmer in the pan, but then in her swatch, it looks a little more red. And I decided to pick a special shade. This is also from Glam Shop. This is Scandal or Scandal, which looks like, you know, a marble of different shades. Beauties, this is an exciting shimmer and I love it, which is why I chose to use it. It swatches to something very similar to what you see in her swatch, because all of these colors kind of mix together. You see that? Yeah, so you're not going to see the marble, obviously, after swatching it. And then the last color in the palette is Broomstick. Now, I think this color is supposed to be brown or a reddish brown, but in the swatch, it's clearly red, which is why I picked a red. I have the Polish name for this because this is also from Glam Shop. This is Borakskowi. I'm gonna put the Polish name under in the description box in case you're curious. So this is a beautiful dark red. Now, if you want to pick a reddish brown, I talked about a lot of reddish browns in the first palette duping. You can use one of those. I have seen different photos of this palette where that color actually looks brown, so I don't really know what that color is in reality, but I'm just gonna go with red based on the swatch because this is the photo that I'm following. These Glam Shop colors build up to a much deeper shade, just FYI. Beauties, if you enjoyed this video, also check out my other video where I dupe the other palette in this duo. That video is going to be recommended to you at the end of this video. Also, don't forget to like this video so that I know and I make more of these kinds of videos for you all. Thanks again. I love you all. Have an amazing day and until next time. Bye.